Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. A beautiful spring day here in the bonsai zone. Spring sure is an exciting time of the year. Some of the buds are just starting to swell up on the trees now. I can see the larch buds just starting to swell a bit. The buds on my maple trees are also starting to swell. Even some of the seedlings that I planted last year in the little greenhouses are also starting to sprout. My spring fever will have to wait. Let's get back inside now and finish planting my Vietnam style bonsai pots. Outside it's cold enough to see your breath, but in here it's nice and warm and humid. It's time now to put the color coats on the rock. I've got olive drab, which will sort of look like moss or lichen on the rock, and I've got a dark tan color. That'll give the rock a bit of color so it's not so black and white looking. I'm going to start with a wash of my tan color. So I'm just going to put some in my pan. Some paint, add some thinner to it to thin it down. And then I'll start applying it. So I just want it in sections, so let's, try a little bit at a time here. I don't want to cover the whole rock with the tan color. Just to break up that kind of overall gray color. I think that'll do. Okay. Let's go right into the green color now. I'm not even going to let it dry. I'm just going to clean my brush and start the olive drab. Here I go with my olive drab wash, and this will be a little more kind of patchy. I think that's looking pretty good. So the last coat I'm going to do is I'm going to go over with highlights. So almost a white color, almost a whitish gray, and just bring out the highlights of the rock. I will have to let the rock dry before I do that. So I'll finish my other rock, adding the color coats to that. And then we'll come back and start adding the highlights. My color layers are dry now, so I'm going to add my highlights. So I'm just going to use a bit of white, and I'm going to dry brush it on. So I'm going to just kind of streak it vertically like that. And you can see that kind of, it brings out the highlights, but maybe a little too much. So I might have to add some thinner to my brush and kind of blend them in a little more. I don't want it to look like snow. It's looking much better. So I'm going to add a bit of thinner now, just to blend it in a bit. And the thinner is going to be very lightly. I'm just putting a little bit of thinner on my brush, maybe a little bit more. I'm just getting all the white out of my brush, so I'm basically just painting thinner on now. Oh yeah, that blends it in a lot nicer. Doesn't stand out so much. Okay, that's looking pretty natural now, I think. There's a close-up of the rock now, so you can see all the little highlights and the shadows and the color. Here's a shot of the rock inside the pot now, so you can kind of see what the overall composition will look like. Here's a shot of my second rock, painted up now with the highlights. After all the work making these two rocks, I now have to decide, do I like them and am I going to use them? I do like my mountain type rock, and I think the tiger bark ficus would look quite good. Kind of growing out of this section of it, kind of would bend opposite the peak and could look quite good. The other rock I made, I'm not so sure about it, if I like it or not. It's doesn't really look like, you know, a cliff face here. It's maybe a little big for the pot. And I don't really have a tree suitable. I mean, I could plant like this ficus religiosa coming out the center, but yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. So I've decided that I'm not going to use this rock at all. It was an experiment. I tried it. Maybe the next time I'll make a better rock. But I am going to use this one. So we're going to plant probably the tiger bark ficus on top of my mountain-like rock. And then I'll still have to decide what tree to go in this pot. When you're repotting, a good tip is to use a cardboard box, the kind you'd get at a grocery store. You can get all your old soil in the box, and then you can just compost the whole thing, the soil and the box and everything together. So let's get the tree out of the pot. I'll go around the edges. When this tree was last repotted, I did some fairly major root pruning to it. We cut quite a few roots off the bottom. So, and it wasn't too long ago that I did this. Might have even been this summer. I'd have to check an old video. Okay, let's see if it comes out, and it's coming out quite nicely. Put the pot over here. So, it has lots of roots. It's holding the root ball together. So I'm going to start combing the roots out. There's some drainage screen. There was a root here I was hoping to remove, maybe with this repotting. It was kind of growing on a weird angle, and I didn't want to remove it with the last repotting because I would have removed probably too much of the root mass. And the tree may have died. But this time, hopefully, there's enough fine roots supporting the tree that I can get rid of that thick one that crosses there. But we'll see. Once I get all this soil combed out of the roots, we'll see exactly what shape the root base is in. Now again, I said that I'll probably use that mountain stone. If the tree does not suit the planting, I won't use it. I'll just plant the tree by itself. There's no rule that says I have to use those rocks just because I made them. So most of the soil is off the roots now. And it looks like we've got a pretty good fine fibrous root system. There's those two crossing roots that I just can't stand. It looks like fingers going like this or something. It drives me nuts when roots do that, when they cross each other. I don't mind, you know, fine aerial roots crossing, but major surface roots, yeah, that's just something that bothers me, and I have to correct that. It's the kind of thing you ask yourself, would anyone ever grow roots like that on purpose? No, I don't think anyone ever would. So then it's a fault. Okay, so let's try the tree on top of the rock for starters. I'll get rid of this old soil here. There's this possibility, kind of have the tree like that. That looks pretty good. The other possibility going away from the apex of the stone. Another possibility. I don't think any of the other views are suitable. Okay, so I think it's between those two views, either kind of this way or something like that. So we'll have to decide. After looking at the tree, I think it's going to have to be this view. It's got the nicest trunk line. This one has the big cavity that was left over where the tree was, the top of it was air layered off. So, I mean, it's not the worst feature in the world, but it's also got these really bad roots in this view. So it's got those crossing roots in this view. It's got the big hollow in the trunk. This side could become the front later on. I mean, it's got lots of character, and if I fix these roots. But I think for now, something like that looks quite good. It looks quite balanced. The tree goes off balance and curves back, kind of balanced in the center of the pot, and it fits nicely in the rock here. So yeah, I think that's going to be how it's planted. I'm going to start the root work now by just misting the roots. Make sure they're, moist while we're working on the tree. And so the first correction I'm going to make is this root off here. It looks good right up to about here, and then it goes in a weird angle. So this part of the root is quite nice. It flares from the trunk nicely. So if I just cut it off flush there, it'll grow a new ring of roots that'll look really good. So here I go. Somewhere there. Yeah, that's not bad. Get in there. There we go. So I've left the part of the root that I like, which isn't much, but it's some, and gotten rid of the rest. So the next one is this really ugly one that wraps around underneath here. Just drives me crazy, that root. Now I cut off part of it before. You can see a cut mark here, but not many roots have sprouted around that cut point, so they did here. So I'll get rid of this part I don't like, which is right up here. There. And some more of it. There. So these roots, they still kind of curl around a bit, but I think if I, repot them with them out like this, they'll develop into a nice root base eventually. We'll see. Still some more correction work to come on this root base, that's for sure. There always is. So you can see the tree kind of sitting flat now. Not a perfect radial root base, but you can't expect everything at once. So next I'm going to test fit the tree on top of the rock. So somewhere about there. The roots going over the rock like that. Down into the soil. I probably won't do a lot of root pruning because I want them long to go down into the soil here. Get them kind of established on the rock. Yeah, they're not too bad a length. Put them in there like that. Yeah, so I think that's going to work quite nicely. Okay, I'll get out the soil now. We'll see if we can get the tree fitted and in place. Before I continue with the planting, I'm going to check the composition from the front just to make sure everything's looking the best it can. Here's the tree down at eye level, and I think everything's looking good. I like the whole composition. To hold the tree in place while the roots, slowly grip the rock over the years, I'm going to put a real rock, just kind of set it here, which supports the tree, and then I can plant it. So I don't have to attach the tree with, wire or tie it on or anything. It'll just grow naturally around the rock there. So let's get the soil out and start planting the tree. I'm going to start at this end, holding the roots down and throwing that in like that. Then I'll come up front here. I'll hold those roots down. Like that. And I'll get my spoon and kind of get some soil around the tree there. Then it's time to start working it all into the roots and around the stones. That's getting there. I think I'm going to wet this layer down. So I'll give it a spray, just a light misting at first. Now to hold all the soil in place, I'm going to get some moss and just moss the whole tree, and that'll hold everything so it doesn't spill out. The snow has just recently melted on the front sidewalk, and there's all these strips of moss that grow in the cracks. And it doesn't look very green, but it always has a nice, backing of fine soil that's dust and stuff that's blown in the cracks in the sidewalk. So it's really good for this type of work. So I'm going to plant it with the soil and everything. That'll help hold it all in place. And this, believe it or not, will probably green up in like 2 days. Once it gets watered and warmed, it just goes green really quickly. There's a nice big chunk for the top here. This will keep all those roots nice and humid as they grow. Now I am going to wet that to help stick it down. Just picking out some of the, if you get root hairs in your moss chunks, there's weeds in there. So if you pull them out before you plant it, saves you a little weeding later on. Okay, now it's got the weeds out. Let's put this one right around the back here. You're not going to see much of my rock when it's all done, but it'll be there for another day. And some moss along the front here. We want to cover it all up. So I'll spray it all down. And this will be the secret over the next few weeks, is to keep all this moss misted, at least 2 to 3 times a day. Try and keep it moist so the soil doesn't dry out, so those roots can grow. I'm going to fix up all the moss now, just trying to, neaten it up a bit. Make sure it's all stuck to the soil really well. I'll spin the tree around now, so we'll have a final look at it before I put it back on the bench. There's the left side view. The back. And the right side view. And finally, back to the front. I think I'll let the roots grow for the entire summer, leaving this rock here to support the tree, and then in fall I'll see how stable the tree is, and I can probably remove this rock and start removing some of this moss to expose the cement rock down below. It's time now to plant my second tree, and I have to decide out of these three which I'm going to put in it. This tree has a fairly big pot. It doesn't need repotting very badly, the Schefflera. So I think I'm going to leave it in the pot as is for now, and then we'll put it in another pot later on, maybe in the summer or later this spring. The ficus religiosa, it's quite happy in this pot also. It was repotted fairly recently. Which leads me to the ficus microcarpa, or the ginseng ficus. It had these big ginseng roots, and after I got it, I just sawed them all off level and planted the tree back in the pot, and I'm dying to see what the roots have done. So I think I'm going to put this tree in this pot. So I'll just run my tool around the edges here and loosen it up. So this was just a store-bought ginseng ficus. Your typical one that has all those big roots at the bottom. But you can make some really nice trees out of them. Okay, I'm going to try and pull the tree out now. There it comes. So I filled the bottom of this pot with coarse gravel, so the bonsai soil is just at the top, because that's where I want all the roots to grow. I'll start to comb out the roots. All these aerial roots grew since I repotted it, so they're all new. You can see they've gotten quite woody and fairly thick in just about a year, I think. I'll try and get all this gravel off the bottom. The roots are all tangled in it. I'm just working on removing all the soil from the roots. I can definitely see the points where I cut the roots now. Some have grown in. It's I planted it quite deep in the pot, I guess. A little deeper than I expected. So the plane that I cut the roots off is right about here. So there's a lot above the ground. I'm kind of wondering, is it going to fit in the new pot? Well, we'll see soon, I guess. I'm going to rake the roots into a radial pattern so the tree sits flat on the table. And we'll see exactly what roots we have and what I need to do to them. So I want to get them all raked out so there's no roots tangled underneath the tree. I'm going to start by pruning around the outside of the roots, just getting them more compact. So here I go. I'm going to leave, about this much root. I have to make it fairly compact if it is going to fit in this new pot. And I do like the roots to subdivide. I don't want them big long roots. Now we'll test fit it in the pot and see if we're even close to fitting. Well, we are kind of close. It's not the worst. It's rather a bizarre looking root base on this tree though. Okay, so it can definitely fit in this pot with a bit of trimming. So let's address some of the big problems with this. One is these great big bulbous potato-like roots. I think we're going to have to do something with those. These great big ginseng-like roots, there's two choices with them. You can either try and grow aerial roots that cover them up so you get finer roots on the surface of them, or you can cut them into sections and they'll eventually kind of start rounding and look like individual roots. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut them into sections. I'm going to carve 2 grooves down the center, so I'll break them into 3 separate roots. I'm going to start by running my carving tool down the root, so I'm going to start about here, and I'll just carve a groove down, and I'm going to put a block of wood under my table. I've put a block of wood under so I don't damage my table. So here I go. I'm just going to run this groove down. Like that. Just neaten that up. Like that. There's one. And I'll do one down here too. Like that. Now I got to clean them up, so I want to make them fairly deep. There we go. That's good. You can see how deep it is. So this part of the living root will callus and roll over, and eventually it'll look like one root. So that one's done. Let's go around. So this part is okay. It has lots of aerial roots I can position to cover up this section. This one's not okay. It's going to need some grooves too. So I'm going to start here. I'll do the same thing. Something like that. I'll just make it a little deeper. Just cleaning up the cuts there. There we go. So that one's done, that groove. And I'm going to run one down here also. Like that. This may seem a little strange, but it works. It works quite well. So the last root is we have a great big one here. We've got to do the same thing. So I'm going to run one groove down here. Like that. There we go. And I've got to run one groove down here. There we go. Just make it a little deeper. Now I could run one more down here, which I think I will. It's still a little wide here, so I'll run one more down here. Like that. Maybe one down here too. Like that. Yeah, I think that's going to do it. We may get some aerial roots coming out of these cut points, and it'll help kind of fill in this so it looks more roots than, you know, this plain look to it. There's a close-up of the roots now. It looks bizarre, but in a few years it all calluses over and looks very natural. I want to pick a front for the tree now. So there's a couple of factors. There's the trunk thickness. This is the thickest trunk right here. The rest are smaller, so you know, generally that would come towards the front. This will be a good front once all this calluses over and gets more aerial roots coming down. So it's not a bad front. If this were the front, you know, you could grow these thicker. I got all these aerial roots. That could look quite good. But I'm still liking this front for now. I think that's going to be the front for today anyway. Using this as the front, I'm going to test fit the tree in the pot again. So it does fit. There's a few roots that could be corrected here. Like this one kind of comes straight out. I don't like that. So I'm going to take that off. The rest sit pretty good. Quite a big tree for this pot. I didn't expect it to be quite this big. However, there's lots of room for roots to grow in it. It's not a small pot by any means. It's just shallow. Combing the roots out, seeing what's hitting the edge of the pot and what needs trimming, if anything. There's a few roots here that I could trim. They're kind of hitting the edge of the pot. So, okay, I'm going to have a look at it from the front view and see how I like it. I think the tree looks pretty good in this position. It's, you know, nicely side to side. It looks good in the pot. So I think that's going to be it. I think I'm going to put the soil in now. Okay, now I'm going to start working the soil into the roots. I'll add some more soil now because the level's dropped as I work it into the roots. Okay, I'm going to give that a watering. I'll make sure all that soil's making good contact everywhere. Here's a look at the tree in the pot now. I'm going to do the same as the other tree. I'm going to go outside and collect some moss from the sidewalk and we'll plant it all around the tree. Okay, I've got my moss now and I'll start planting it. So these were just in the cracks of the sidewalk. That's why they're in strips like this, which is kind of convenient for this planting. Kind of go around the edges. I'm going to wet the moss as I go. That way I can push it down, get it nice, really good contact with the soil. That way it won't dry out. Moss is really good for keeping the weeds down in your planting. If you have a good layer of moss, usually you don't have to do any weeding at all. Nothing grows through the moss layer. kind of nice. So I don't think anyone likes weeding. I certainly don't. And that's about it. I'll have to trim some of the moss at the front. I'll just trim it away from the lip of the pot here. I'll rotate the tree around 360 degrees. So there's the front view, going around to the left view, around towards the back. There's the back. On the right side. And back to the front. The two trees are planted and they're starting to come out into leaf already. So I'll give an update when it's got a canopy of leaves on top. The moss is already starting to green up in just a few hours. That's all the work I'll be doing here today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me here in the Bonsai Zone.